The moment I realized I should have listened to that stranger happened almost 3 hours after he warned me. At the time, his words sounded ridiculous. He leaned toward me quietly and said something that made no sense. "You should leave before midnight." I remember laughing slightly. Why would I leave? I was having a perfectly normal evening with friends. The music was good. The atmosphere felt relaxed. And the person warning me was someone I had never seen before. So I ignored him. What I did not realize was that by the time midnight arrived, I would understand exactly why he said it. My name is Daniel. About 6 months ago, I moved to a new city for work. The change felt exciting, but also slightly lonely. New apartment, new routine, new people. Because I did not know many people yet, I spent a lot of time exploring the city on my own. Cafes, restaurants, parks. Eventually, I began meeting people through coworkers and mutual friends. One of those coworkers was someone named Chris. Chris was extremely outgoing. He always knew the best places to go for food and nightlife. One Friday evening, he invited several of us to a small lounge downtown. "It is a relaxed place," he said. "Good music, comfortable atmosphere." At first I hesitated. Crowded nightlife was not usually my favorite environment. But after a long week at work, the idea of going out with colleagues sounded nice. So I agreed. Looking back, that decision seems incredibly simple. At the time it felt like nothing more than a casual night out. But that evening introduced me to a stranger whose warning I still remember clearly. The lounge was located on a quiet street, surrounded by restaurants and small shops. From the outside, it looked almost ordinary. Dim lights, soft music drifting through the entrance. Inside, the atmosphere felt warm and comfortable. Not too loud, not too crowded. Exactly the kind of place where people could talk easily. Chris introduced me to several friends. Rian, Jessica, Laura. Everyone seemed friendly. Within minutes, the conversation felt natural. We ordered drinks, shared stories about work, laughed about small things that happened during the week. For a while, the night felt completely ordinary. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. Just a group of people enjoying a Friday evening. That is why the stranger's warning felt so strange when it finally happened. About an hour after we arrived, I stepped outside briefly to take a phone call. When I finished the call and returned inside, I noticed someone sitting alone near the entrance. He looked older than most people in the lounge, perhaps mid-40s. Quiet, observing the room carefully. At first I did not pay much attention, but as I walked past his table, he suddenly spoke. "Excuse me." His voice was calm but serious. I stopped for a moment. "Yes." He looked directly at me. "You should leave before midnight." For a second I assumed he was joking, but his expression remained completely serious. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated slightly. Then he said something even stranger. "Just trust me." That was all. No explanation. No additional detail. Just that sentence. At the time the situation felt odd, but not threatening. Strangers sometimes say unusual things in public places. So I nodded politely and continued walking toward my friends. Within minutes, the conversation distracted me, and I forgot about the warning completely. As the night continued, the atmosphere slowly became more energetic. More people arrived. Music grew louder. The lounge filled with conversation and laughter. For a while, I enjoyed the evening without thinking about the stranger at all. But around 11 o'clock, something unusual happened. Chris leaned closer and asked a quiet question. "Did you notice that guy near the entrance?" I turned slightly. The same stranger was still sitting at the same table, watching the room carefully. "Yeah," I said casually. "Why?" Chris shrugged. "I feel like he has been staring at our group all night." That comment made me glance toward the man again. For a brief moment, our eyes met. Then he looked away. Something about his expression felt concerned. Not angry, not threatening, just deeply uneasy. And suddenly, I remembered his warning. Leave before midnight. For the first time, that sentence returned to my mind. But even then, I did not take it seriously. Instead, I laughed slightly. "Maybe he just likes the music," I said. Chris smiled and returned to the conversation. But the thought stayed quietly in the back of my mind. Around 11:30, the lounge became extremely crowded. People moved closer together. The music volume increased. Rian suggested ordering another round of drinks. Jessica started telling a story that made everyone laugh. The entire group felt relaxed and happy. Yet every few minutes I noticed something unusual. The stranger had not moved. He was still sitting at the same table, still watching the room carefully. And occasionally his eyes moved toward me. At one point he stood up and walked toward the exit. As he passed our table, he slowed down slightly. For a brief second he looked at me again. Then he quietly repeated the same words. "You should go now." Before I could respond, he walked outside. At that moment a strange feeling appeared. Not fear, just uncertainty. Why would someone repeat such a warning? But again I dismissed the thought. The night continued. The music continued. And midnight slowly approached. Exactly 5 minutes before midnight, the atmosphere changed suddenly. The music stopped. Several staff members moved quickly toward the entrance. At first, no one understood what was happening. People looked around confused. Then someone near the door shouted something. A loud argument had started outside. Through the window, we could see several people gathering near the street. Security staff rushed toward the entrance. Within seconds, the relaxed atmosphere disappeared. Guests began whispering. Some people stood up to watch. Chris looked toward the door with curiosity. "What is going on?" At that moment, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten slightly. Across the street stood the same stranger. The man who warned me earlier. He was speaking urgently to one of the security guards. And then I heard part of the conversation. "He told them earlier," the guard said loudly. "He warned them about the group." Within seconds, several police cars arrived. Blue lights flashed across the street. The crowd outside quickly dispersed. Inside the lounge, people watched silently. Eventually, a staff member explained the situation. A group of individuals had been planning to start a violent confrontation inside the lounge at midnight. Apparently, the stranger had overheard their conversation earlier that evening. Instead of leaving, he stayed and quietly warned several people who were closest to the entrance, including me. That was the moment I finally understood. His warning had been genuine. He was trying to prevent people from being caught in a dangerous situation. And I had ignored him completely. The lounge closed shortly afterward as a precaution. Guests slowly left the building. Outside, the street felt quiet again. As I walked toward the subway station with Chris and the others, I kept thinking about the stranger's words. Leave before midnight. If the confrontation had started inside the lounge, the situation could have become chaotic very quickly. Yet he had tried to warn people calmly, without causing panic. I never saw him again after that night. but his warning stayed in my mind. Sometimes people say things that sound strange at first. Sometimes instincts tell someone that something is wrong. And sometimes ignoring a warning can lead dangerously close to consequences we never expected. Looking back, I realized something important. Not every warning deserves immediate trust, but sometimes it deserves at least a moment of attention. Because the stranger who warned me that night was not trying to scare anyone. He was trying to help. Everyone has experienced moments when something feels slightly unusual. A strange comment, a warning, a small instinct that something might be wrong. Most of the time, those moments turn out to be nothing. But occasionally they matter. If a stranger warned you to leave a place immediately, would you listen? Or would you assume it was just a strange comment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy suspenseful real-life stories about strange encounters and unexpected moments, subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the most ordinary nights can turn into stories we never forget.